Welcome back after our little vacation, and it's good to be back. As you can see behind me, I still have a few more boxes to unpack. It looks a little blank back there. I'm working on it, but today we're working on blocks 5, 7, and 8. And the reason that I skipped number 6, it's in the next level of steps if you look at the pattern. So what we're going to be doing today is kind of putting those 3 blocks together, looking at possibilities for each of those blocks and working through some of that. So if you'll take a look with me as I go to the first block, block number 5, I want to explain also a little bit about the fact that I have been changing some of the directions and how we're sewing the blocks together over the last few weeks. And so the blocks are here done as a grid, and each one is a 2-inch square finished. But there are different ways that you can tackle these projects and make them work for you. And so I have done some of that in case you want another way to look at things, or to put a block together or sew them together with a little less of the seams that go into all of these. But if you follow Mendy's directions, you are going to you're going to be just fine. The block will go together wonderfully, and I will put up the new cutting instructions with each of the patterns for a few minutes so that you can see exactly what I have done. And I'm going to put them up here while I talk about this particular block number 5. So when I looked at the block, there's a couple of things that I noted. I like to use for half square triangles the single star paper. So whenever I get the opportunity to use the single star paper, I do, because I don't have to trim down. It saves me some time and some effort. So I see right away that there's 2, 4, 6, 8 of these dark points, half square triangles. So I know that my star paper makes 8 of those, and so I can use it for that. So I'm going to change those half square triangles to using my single star paper. And with the single star paper with a finished block of 2 inches, I need a 6-inch square. So in my background, I am going to have, as you see on the screen, a 6-inch dark red square and a 6-inch of the background fabric in this block. And when I look at the rest of the block, I see that there are 4 more half square triangles. And so I'm going to make those the traditional way, the 2 7/8 squares sewn, the line drawn for the cutting line down the center, and so on either side on the diagonal, a 1/4 inch. And then I'm going to use the time saver that she has here for the 2.5 by 4.5 inch rectangles. So that's how I look at a block. I read through all the directions first. And so if you want to do this in the same manner that I did, that's kind of my thinking on that. And of course, these blocks will go in as 2.5 inch squares and then 2-inch finished. So let me whip around here. I want to get the package of the star singles, and this is the squares and how they look. We've talked about these before, but I want to share again with you. It says half square triangle, 2-inch finished block. So you always buy your paper the size of the finished block that you want. And here it tells you exactly what size of square to cut, and then it's very easy to follow the numbers along there. So that's the single star squares, and I made the first half of this block, and now I'm going to get rid of this for right now. I have made my single star half square triangles, which are these, and I have made, my half square triangles that are here, and started with putting in that middle sashing piece. Now I want to point out to you one of those things about stripes, and I have stripes in here, and if you look over here, I was not paying close attention when I cut these, and here I have a stripe that's going horizontally and the rest are going vertically, and these two are going horizontally. Now I have two options with this. First of all, I really need to make a decision on, does that bother me enough that I need to change it, or is it fine and how the stripes land is okay, or do I want to change it out? And for right now, I am going to leave it as it is and just kind of see how much it bothers me that I did not take the time to, re-look at my stripes on this and make sure that they were all going vertically. And that's the one thing that you do need to do if you're going to put a stripe into a fabric. You really need to pay attention to that. And so if that makes a difference to you, make sure that when you are drawing your line and sewing your half square triangles, that you sew in the direction on your diagonal that will keep your lines going either horizontally or vertically, whichever you choose you want them to do. So, but for today and for the sake of this, I am going to finish this block off, and I'm not going to worry about which direction my stripes are going at this point. So I have my last section here that I need to make, and I want to put this block here, and I want to put, so this is how this section will be sewn together. And when I do that, there's a couple of things that I want to mention to you in regards to putting these and sewing them. You need to understand your machine and how your machine is going to react, because if I just put this under and sewed it here, sometimes this extra bulk where the seam comes up and that close to the edge under your presser foot, it will push this fabric and it will pull it to the left or to the right depending on your machine, and it won't want to go over that real well. So it might be better for you to flip it over and sew from this direction and come into that. With the machine that I have, I am able to go ahead and sew it with very little problem of my machine going over that edge. So that's what I'm going to do. But again, you need to really know your machine and know what it is going to do for you and what it won't do for you, and adjust accordingly. So I have now the top two sewn, and I'm going to do the same with the bottom part. Now here on this one, I need to butt these seams together and get those in there tightly. And what can happen with your machine is that may want to pull away. So when I have two seams like that coming together, I like to drop a pin in for a little bit just to make sure that stays put as I'm sewing. So I've dropped a pin in there, and I need to make sure that that pin stays, or the fabric stays where it needs to be as I'm sewing. All right, let's go to, I am going to press this bottom one. And again, and again, you need to make sure that you are pressing in opposite directions so that they butt up to each other. And I'm giving an extra little, I don't know, pressure, or whatever you want to call it, where these seams come together like this. Now, as I pin these together, I've pressed them so that they're going in opposite directions, and I can butt these seams up. I've shared this with you before, that I pin going from the top right hand side to the left, so that I can take one stitch over that line and make sure that it stays put. Here we have those two seams that are butted up against each other and coming together. So I do want to drop another pin there, so that I don't have to, have to guess. And let me make sure that, move this over a little bit. If it's going to stay put or not, or I will have it where I need it to go while I'm sewing. All right. So now I have my seams sewn together, and when I open them, I look at that and say, well, which direction do I want to press it to? And instead of only in one direction, I'm going to put my fingers on the left and the right of those seam allowances and give it a little twist, so that I have that little four patch on the inside. I take the nose of my iron and I kind of give it a good pressing there. And then this, I'm going to make sure that that is all pressed nicely on that side and pressed well on that side. And that way everything is laying pretty well flat. And then I can place that into my block. So here, and then butt those seams together and sew it from that. And so then you would have your block number 5. And again, if you do tend to want to use the stripe on that, please be sure to check which direction your stripes are going, so that you get them all going in the same direction, if that's important to you. And I'll have to decide whether I'm going to take those out or not. Now I'm going to block 7, and we've made this block before. It's the triple triangle, and I'd like to be able to say that I made a decision to not make those half square triangles for my corners, but I didn't really make a decision. I just forgot as I was sewing. And so I for me today, they're solid squares. But the first thing that you would need to do on block 7 is those 4 corner half square triangles, again 2 and 7/8 inch. Both the background fabric and the red fabric of choice, and then that half square triangle would be sewn to your 2.5 by 3.5 inch background rectangle, and opposite there as well. Then once you have done that, you will need to draw your lines for your, and I had my ruler here. There it is. So when I'm drawing my lines, I want to put my 45-degree angle across the top of my block. And once that is in place from the point of the 3.5 inch rectangle, with a little bit larger ruler, then I can mark, and the line goes right here where those 2 seams intersect, and I would draw my line. I would turn my block around and do the same thing again on the other side. And again, when I have that 45-degree angle across the top of my block, it hits right there where those 2 seams intersect, and I have my lines drawn. Once I've done that, then I need to, this measures 4.5 by 5.5, so I've cut myself a rectangle for the background. And here I have those stripes again, and if you use stripes on this, you're going to get one that's going vertically and one that's going horizontally. So you probably, or you may not want to use a stripe for this. I chose them today so that I would have an opportunity with you to talk a little bit about how stripes can affect the outcome of your blocks. So for me, in the grand scheme of things, it's probably not going to make a huge bit of difference. But again, it does make a difference in the overall outcome of your block. So I have sewn those 2 together. Again, I have snipped into my seam allowance right here so that I can press them so this square block is open all the way, so I know that I am getting my markings correct and that my lines have gone through here. And again, when I am stitching on this triple triangle, I always want to start down here because the point can sometimes get mooshed under there or drawn in. So I will tend to start, and I will sew on the line. And I will turn it around and do exactly the same thing again on the other side. All right, then I would like to once again show you that I lay my ruler with my 1/4 inch line on that sewing line, and you'll see that I have a little bit left over in the center. and that's to be discarded. And then I have my, and I just showed that all without being on the screen. So these two were together, and I had this little piece so that when I marked it, I was putting my 1/4 inch seam line on my sewing line. I cut that away. I turned it around, did the same thing on this side, and I had that little bit left over that I'm going to discard. And then when you open it, you have your triple triangle, and the pattern shows that this is a half square triangle. So if you want to make that, you'll need to make those first. And then again, the block will go together and will look like that for block number 7 in our work today. All right, then I want to go to block number 8, our last one. And this is the one that I want to talk a little bit about because as you can see, I was really messing around here with what I did or didn't want to do with this block. But let's just take a look at the block originally. There are a lot of half square triangles that come together, and we want to make sure that those points are coming together, because in a block like this, if you're off with these points, and the same thing with pinwheels, etc., different ones of that nature, you can really tell it. It's going to show up far more on screen than if you did not. So I can see right away that I have 12 of these. So I can do all 12 of them as individual half square triangles, or I can do at least 8 of them with my single star paper and only do 4, the traditional method with the 2 7/8 inch squares. And that's what I chose to do. So I made 8 of these doing with the single star paper. That was 8 of them I didn't have to trim or change or do anything with once I had them sewn together. And then I made the additional ones with the 2 7/8 sewn together and then trimmed down. And I cut my squares to 3 inches so that I could trim them down and make sure that they were exactly what they needed to be. So and this one, if you look carefully at the picture, these were background fabrics, and this one was a little bit different fabric, so I chose a different fabric for that as well. And so I have I just chose a different background fabric for that one. But then I was looking at these, and generally I would say, yeah, you would sew 2 squares together. But then I was thinking, well, I could do that a little bit quicker by sewing that as a strip and cutting it apart in 2 1/2 inch increments. So that's what I am doing today. And because there were 4 of them, I cut my strips at 2 1/2 by 11. That gave me a little bit extra to play with. And I wanted to share with you a little bit about pressing when you get to sewing strips together and how those are pressed so that you don't get that curve that sometimes will happen when you are sewing or pressing long strips. Technically, I would say that what we want to do is lay it on our ironing board like this and press along and do this number. But what I find happens, and then I notice with students, and they will ask me the question, why do I always get this kind of a curve or a rainbow effect going with my strip sets, and especially if you have a long strip set that's like 40 inches long. And it's because our arm is like a pendulum and it wants to go in a curve. And so when we iron, we tend to iron in a curve is really what we're doing. So let me show you what I have come up with for both myself and my students to get rid of that curve. I will put my strip set on my ironing board this way, vertically instead of horizontally. Then I use my iron to go along and simply press in that seam line so that it's nice and flat. And then again, I do not really run the iron along. I simply set the iron on the seam line. And I do that vertically and not horizontally. And pretty much comes out straight, and I don't have that curve in it. And then for this block, I want to make sure that this is aligned. And so I'm going to trim a little bit off of to square that up. And then I'm going to cut that at my 2.5 inch intervals. So that I have my and just to share with you, I am aligning that on the seam line and along the edges and along the bottoms to make sure that I have everything aligned in every possible direction that I can so that I'm getting good cuts out of that. I'm only going to cut the 2 for right now because I'm going to make 4 units. If you look at your pattern again, I have a 4 square unit, a 4 square unit, a 4 square unit, a 4 square unit, and these will be sewn to that center. These units here will be sewn as that center piece in here. So I'm going to make those 4 corners, sew this piece in between the 2, sew this along here, and make it just as I've done all the other blocks. But I want to talk about those points again, because what we're really striving for is to make sure that everything aligns right here in the center so that all those points come together. So for the second, that's the upper left block. So let's go to the other side. And we'll have our top right hand side that's going to look like that. And again, when I put those together, I need to know whether my machine is going to go over that perfectly fine, or if I need to do some pinning on that. And when I sewed the other ones together, I noticed that the machine was doing just fine with it, so I am going to go ahead and sew that. And then I'm going to do the same thing again here, butting those seams up to each other. All right, so now we have and somehow I think I did that upside down. And I did. So, or backwards actually, because that's not the way I need it to go. But I do want to pin it together, so I need to switch these 2 out because I sewed those incorrectly. Again, I'm going to sink my threads. You know, it's the pits that made a couple of mistakes this morning. And when I, press those together, here is where the pinning comes into place that I want to talk a little bit about again, because as I butt those seams up together, it's going to be real important for me to know that those two seams come together. So the one way to do that is to drop a pin right in where that piece comes up, and then drop it into the next one and work your way into that. I press the needle all the way so it stays in place while I make adjustments on both ends. And here is where I would come back. And for the sake of everything staying in place and being where I need it to be, I'm going to drop a pin on that corner. And now that I have this exactly where it's supposed to be, I'm again going to pin from the top right across to the bottom left. And now I can remove that pin so that I can again sew across that. And when it's completed, I will be able to break open the seam and press that down, and I will have gotten all of those points to come in. And right here where there's a polka dot in there, it makes it look like it's not coming together quite, but it is. And that's what we want to try to accomplish as we're working on that last block. So hopefully those were a few helpful hints for you as we, as we work on our block. And you're going to see that as we put this together, that's going to work its way around, and then we have our center square here, and we can keep working that around, and we'll have our block, the monkey wrench block, completed. So that will be for this week. Hopefully you won't goof up like I did on screen, and it'll go smoothly for you. And between your pinning and your sewing and the stitching and getting to know your machine and how it reacts and responds to you, that you will have some very successful blocks that will fit in. So go ahead and sew those 3 blocks together along with your red strip, and we're ready for putting the next section of applique on for next week. Looking forward to doing that along with you. There's a little bit of gathering done on the sunflowers, some different things, so we'll take a look at that and make sure that our vase from last time is exactly on the stoop where you want it to be, and that it all aligns. And I'm excited to see what you've done as far as embellishing your flowers, if you've chosen to do that, either with machine stitching or by hand, adding, possibly some beads and some embroidery work to those. And if you've been watching Alex's class and saw the episode with Sue Spargo, you might have picked up a few ideas and got excited over adding your own embellishments to the work. And that will be a lot of fun to see how that flows. So if you are able to go into the forum and post some pictures, would love to see those. If you have any questions or comments, there's a place in the forum for that under Dee's Saturday Sampler. And so I hope that you will do that. And I just remembered that yesterday was introduced a new Quilter Select ruler. It is the 12 by 6 ruler, and it's pink. And the reason it's pink is because part of the proceeds of that ruler will go for fighting breast cancer. And so for those of you who have been affected by breast cancer, either personally or family-wise, or friends that you know of, then if you are in the market for a new ruler, I hope you'll think about the 6 by 12 inch ruler from Quilter Select and go for it. So you have an absolute wonderful week. I'm going to unpack a few more boxes and get working on my applique, and I'll see you back here next Saturday for that. Have a great week.